and hopefully 2021 promises to be much better and healthier than the previous year. I am really proud of the work we've done in the last 4 months that you've done. And I don't know if everybody on here, I know some people have varying experiences of working in policy work or legislative work or political legislative work. But it often is an arduous, long process. And I think when you look at it with that lens and look at what we've accomplished in 4 months, we have a lot to hang our hat on. So I see Alan's smiley face on there, and I start with the good news that on Monday, the governor was in a press conference with him and Representative Lundstrom and Senator Lopez about supporting publicly endorsing HJR 1, the constitutional amendment that taps our permanent land grant fund at 1%. And so I'm very excited about the prospects this legislative session. You all recommended that. It's a big lift and with great possibilities for our state. So I wanted to say that one, we can check the box, and we love to work with you moving forward and getting that passed. The second bill that I'm proud to say that the governor is supporting and as a priority is Senator Lopez's institutional racism bill that was tabled in the special session. SB 7 was passed in the Martinez administration but got vetoed. So the governor is in full support of that. She is generally, and some of the bills I'm going to mention, they need some work, but in general theory, she's supportive of. Senator Antoinette Cedillo Lopez's prosecutorial bill. There's some kinks, apparently. I'm not a lawyer, but our legal counsel has been talking to the Attorney General's office, has spoken with Senator Cedillo Lopez about some of the areas that need some work. So generally speaking, we're in support of it. We'll see how it moves through the legislative process working with the Attorney General's office. So I wanted to share that good news with you. The governor wants to support a paid family leave bill. As you know, there are 2 bills in the offing, and there are multiple questions involved, and budgetary questions and implementation questions. So while she's generally supportive, there's work to do in that, and it has a heavy price tag too in these economic times. But she wants to support one of those bills, so we'll see how they move through this process. So again, I wanted to commend you on that. She, in her budget that was released Monday, put in the budget funding for a race equity director in the governor's office. She had spoken to Representative William Stapleton, or one of our staff members did, talking about the best way to move forward with the proposal of formally establishing the council versus doing this, and where to house it. Would it be in SPO? And I think the conclusion that we came up with is the best place to start now is to put it in the governor's office. It would have direct line to the governor and communication, and to continue the work that we're all doing here. And we want the advisory council to continue. I mean, we've only really been formally up and running for roughly 4.5 months. And so we want this work to continue. And hopefully that, as you know, that budget has to be passed by the legislature. Hopefully they will give us the funding for that position and we can get it taken care of. But she formally put it in her budget proposal. So that would be a great addition to our office for this effort and for the state as we move forward in the weeks to come. She knows that there's qualified immunity legislation coming before her. There's a lot of opposition to it from municipalities and counties, county governments. We'll see. I mean, she anticipates it getting to her desk in some form or another, and she'll see what arrives at her desk. So that's kind of where we are with our initial efforts. I wanted to encourage us to be as active in the legislative process as possible. I believe Alexandria and Amy are going to talk to you about ways you can do that this legislative session. I know an op-ed was submitted on behalf of the Race Council in support of HJR 1, which is excellent. And I don't want to diminish these efforts at all. I mean, these are big initiatives we're putting forward. whether it's HJR1, paid family leave, qualified immunity. I mean, they are big policy efforts. And so let's see what we can get done. And as you know, this legislative session is going to be very challenging because there's bill limits. On the House side, each member is being encouraged to just introduce 5 bills. We're dealing with a virtual session, which logistically is going to be challenging. It's not the same as a normal session. And so I think we have an ambitious agenda, and hopefully we can get it all across the finish line. So I just thank you, and we'll remain plugged in and move this work forward as we continue to move along. So thank you so much. And thank you, Amy and Alexandria and everybody for your work.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. That's great to hear. Are you able to take some questions if anyone has questions?
Yeah, I can. I hate to say this, and it's not on purpose, but I have a meeting with the governor in 1 minute that I don't like being late with her. Just FYI, she is my boss. So her meeting's at 4:15, which worked out perfect. So thank you for taking me up front. But if you have a question or two, happy to entertain them. I might not be able to answer them, but let's see. Are there any questions?
Hi, Carolyn. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think one of the questions I have, which we were hoping to, have addressed with the plan for permanency, is the charge for this council going forward, right? And what it is that we are charged with specifically in doing, so that we can come together as a council to set priorities about how we move this work forward going from now.
Okay. And I welcome that discussion. And I don't know if we want to take it offline and then propose something to the council as a whole for the next meeting. Are you all going to be meeting bi-weekly still in the new year, or just monthly?
So I don't think we've made that decision yet. It's on the table to talk about today, but I think okay. We probably not bi-weekly during the session, as we want a lot of work to be done during the session.
Yeah.
And so, no. Okay.
So why don't we, whoever you want to pull together into a planning meeting to talk about what you think is the best direction moving forward. I'm willing to participate in that, and then propose it to senior staff and the governor and get their feedback and circle back with you on that.
Thank you, Carolyn. I will work on that. And folks who are interested in being part of that conversation, please email me and let me know, or put that in the chat, and I'll make sure that you're part of that initial conversation to start some planning on that.
Okay. Do you have anything else before I go? Bye, Alan. Bye, Alexandria. I'll see you the next meeting.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Alexandria, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy, for opening for us. Hello, Happy New Year, or New Year greetings. Yeah, just take a deep breath with everything. So next on our agenda is a discussion around, well, one, I guess, let's open up. I know Carolyn had to leave, but let's have some discussion about what we just heard with what's on the governor's agenda and what from our recommendations are on there. And so maybe we can just talk about if there are any comments or questions that came up, even though Carolyn's not here to answer those questions, if there's stuff that you would like for us to bring up about that, what was just presented.
I'll just remind folks that you can raise your hand in the participants menu. You can put things in the chat, and you can also put things in the Q&A. For those who are in our audience, you can put items in the Q&A as well. It looks like we have our first question here. Thanks, Hussein. It's just a comment. I was so excited to see this list of priorities. Thank you. Oh, here is the question. Was there any thoughts about mandating or encouraging state prisons to provide opioid use disorder treatment?
So that would be a question for the governor's office. And then Rabbi Lennick, I see your hand.
Just wondering if the prosecutorial bill is referring to SB 17. Because that was not made clear.
Yes, so she is referring to SB 17, which has been sent to the Attorney General's office to look at some legal issues that may be within that bill.
Dr. Romero.
Hello, everybody. It's good to see everyone. I missed all your faces. Good to see you all tonight. I just wonder if there's been any discussion about, as we move into the legislative session, and because it's a unique session, and one, it's a 60-day session, but two, we're not going to be able to go to the roundhouse and be in committee. Is there a way that we've talked about in which we can help support these bills that go through? You know, as we start to see them be presented and what committees they're going to be in, how we can best continue to communicate with those committees, those representatives and senators. Any idea about how we can do that so we can do this very efficiently?
That's a very timely question. It's actually the next item on our agenda, and so we can enter into that a bit now, is how the council is going to work during legislative session. I think my understanding and what we were waiting for was to hear what the governor's priorities are that were also recommended from the council, that were part of our recommendations, and so how we can now move forward in supporting those initiatives from various different ways. And so, Amy, I believe you all are tracking all of those bills now that we have them named. And I think that that's an item for discussion for us, is to talk about how we want to support some of these things. We have submitted an op-ed that was co-authored by the Permanent Land Grant Fund Work Group. And so we can also be thinking about, now that we have other items named, if there are other ways that we want to advocate for those things as well. And so, Amy, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add to that about like how staffing this looks and how council members can be called in to support on different things.
So I think, right, that is, that's the big question, is how do we want to move forward? There are so many different ways to advocate, even when we're in this virtual space. There are op-eds that we can do for those items that have been approved, that Carolyn just listed. There are ways that each of you can individually advocate and say that you're doing it as a member of the council. We can also do some joint efforts of contacting legislators and things like that. On our side, we will be tracking those bills that she has said from our recommendations that she has said she's in support of, and we'll try and give updates as they're coming. Again, we may want to talk about how much of that you want to be updated on. Do you want weekly updates, daily updates, that kind of thing? So it's all open. I think we've shared this with you all many times before. Shani and Tammy and Kaylee and I are volunteering as staff on this, but this is legislative session, is a time when we're all very, deep into this practice. And so we do not mind following that at whatever level you are interested in having that information.
Yeah, so whether Dr. Romero or others, we can open this up for discussion if you have ideas around how you would like to see council members involved in the legislative session.
Absolutely. Maybe I can just get started and then we can throw out ideas. I think one is maybe we can make sure that we have an updated list of all of our senators and representatives, make sure we have emails. I know for many of us, we've got contacts with them where we can directly get them on their cell phone. So I think that's always the best ways as they are moving through and starting to hear from us now. I think the next thing I want to know is, as they get presented, how are they going to be moving through committee? And I would love to be able to help present these if we can. For many of us, we did a lot of work and a lot of background on why we're doing this, why it's important, a lot of the research on it. And so if we can help any of the sponsoring representatives, senators do that, I'd be happy to do that. I think other members of the committee would also be happy to do that. And we may want to think about how we could just somewhat organize ourselves so that we at least have one or two of us each day kind of tracking this through. And I know that you said that you all may be able to help do that, but maybe another way to say that is for us to be on call so that we can be there to answer questions, give our input, and so on and so forth throughout the session. That's usually the work that has to be done, especially if we know what committees they're in. Are they going to be seen on Mondays and Wednesdays, Tuesdays and Thursdays? Those are all good things for us to know. I'll stop there and I'll let some others join in on the conversation.
Yeah, I think those are all really great points. Any other comments or questions, ideas? Rabbi Lennick, is that?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm wondering if one or two people couldn't be assigned or volunteer, I should say, to these initiatives, who would carry through whatever the types of involvement we can generate, and in a sense break us up into people who would, in a sense, shepherd each of these different initiatives that the governor has identified in her priorities.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you. Any other thoughts so far? I'm thinking, looking at these priorities, we have had contact with all of these bill sponsors. They have been citing that the Racial Justice Council recommended these priorities to the governor. And so I think a really good path forward would be to do, as you said, Rabbi Lennick, and kind of identify who point people on these different priorities will be. And then perhaps I would offer that either myself or whoever the point person is for those different priorities reach out to the sponsoring legislatures and let them know that, as Dr. Romero said, the council is ready and here are the ways that we are willing to participate, and make sure that they have everybody's direct contact information for that as well. So does that sound like an agreeable plan? Yeah, and are there council members that would like to start volunteering for specific priority areas? So we have the HJR1. Mr. Sanchez.
Yeah, I'm already involved with that as an expert witness with the sponsors. So not that I bow out. I'll be present and I can relay information, but I think new faces will be have more effect on that. And we go forward, and I would love for all of us to be able to speak at these hearings. And I think if we let chairpersons know before a hearing that you want to speak, they'll call on us. You'll be in the audience, but they'll look for our name if we if they know that. And I think we just have to be a little careful how we present ourselves. I don't want to put us in a position that we have to advocates have to register as lobbyists. So I think we can be relaying the recommendations of the council, but we don't have to make all the arguments. Then they can go and read what's been produced by the council. But I think we're okay to say, you're referring to the council instead of that you're representing the council. Yeah, because that otherwise every one of us would have to go register as a lobbyist, and that'd be we want to be within the rules, of course, but I don't think we're functioning as lobbyists. I think as a brain trust for the governor as a council. I think we put it back on the governor's position.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And again, relaying the recommendation of the council and that there was a lot of work going into arriving at those recommendations. I'm out of practice in WebEx. Sorry, I'm clicking around and it's taking me a moment.
That's great. If I can just go through some of the questions that are on here. We have a question from Christopher Ramirez, who is one of our subcommittee members, and he's asking for the legislative session and for moving forward, what should the role of the subcommittees be?
That's a really good question, Christopher. I think for the latter part of your question regarding future meetings, I think when we have that meeting, when we pull the meeting together around the direction of the council and what the charge is for the council moving forward, it would be good to have the chairs of the subcommittees participate on that. Perhaps even a few members from the subcommittees, because I think that's a part of that larger question of how this council moves forward as a group, and the structure that's going to move forward going forward. And I think, you know, the recommendations, this is open for discussion, but I think the recommendations were a reflection of not just the main council here, but the 3 subcommittees' work as well. The work groups were integrated with people from all of the different subcommittees. And so I think the role is similar for subcommittee members as it is for the central committee. And folks have thoughts about that. So I think if there are of the policy, okay, I'll get to that question as well, Dr. Patel. I think that if folks have ideas of the bills that have been put forward by Carolyn today that you would want to be kind of a part of or be working on and available for, we should start identifying those so that we can name them, because we won't have another chance to meet before session begins. So we should start putting names to those priority pieces of legislation.
So I've had my hand up for a little bit now. I wanted to jump in really quick.
I didn't see it.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. I apologize. I did not see your hand.
Sorry about that. So yeah, I just wanted to jump in really quick. I had to pull over so I can get some internet, but and I'll hop on video as soon as I get home. But I just wanted to say, like, number one, you know, we have as an organization, we have pretty much a full slate of legislative priorities already that we'll be working on that probably would still fall in line with a lot of the you know, core tenets of the group, but it is like our personal work, and just remembering that a lot of us are you know, still employed and doing this like after hours is pretty important for trying to figure out how we do the work going forward. That said, I am interested in a couple of bills, and we'll probably be working on those anyway. And I wanted to see if we could get a potential update on Senator O'Neill's bill for the racial equity analysis and where that ended up at. If there's a draft, or if there were any changes to that, or if it's exactly the same legislation we read earlier in the year or earlier last year.
So I don't have any updates from Senator O'Neill after he presented to the interim committee on, don't quote me on this, but I believe who he presented to was the Crime and Corrections Committee. Yeah, I think that's what it was. I'll get exact information on that. But he did present to the interim committee. They gave him some suggestions as well. I have not seen the bill since then. I have not heard from Senator O'Neill either. It is not, it was one of our recommendations, but it is not one that the governor responded to that she is recommending and supporting. So for us as the Council for Racial Justice, it's not one that would be in the list that we're going to follow and track and support as a group. But I do think that many of you were individually interested in that. And so we can follow it on our side and provide updates as it moves forward. But it is not something that we as a full council will be able to support.
And that also goes, I think, to Dr. Patel's question. Did you want to ask that, or would you like me to read it out?
Yeah, my question was just basically whether or not our recommendations will be made public, because maybe that can help inform discussions more easily if they're just easily disseminated.
Yeah, so that question is one that we've been asking, all of us have been asking, and my understanding is that at this time, now that we have what the governor is supporting, we could, and Amy, correct me if I'm a little off base here, but I think that the items that we recommended that are a part of her agenda, we could make those public. But as far as the larger report, that is a part of the conversation that we need to have around the charge and mission of the council altogether. And so right now, knowing now what is on her agenda, the things that we recommended that are on the agenda are what we would be able to make public.
That's correct. Yes, thank you. You said it very well.
May I have a just follow-up comment to that then?
Absolutely.
I mean, of the, I believe it was 5, many of them were kind of continuation of issues that have been on the agenda in legislative session for years. And it kind of seems like, you know, the charge of this council, though the governor did accept our recommendations, isn't really being upheld if we're not able to speak publicly about the breadth of the recommendations we make. And so I understand the conversations to be had, but I personally would want them to make a more public discussion around this, especially because there's so many other bills that will address our recommendations that are still going to be up for discussion in the 60-day session. Like the bulk of the health subcommittee's work is not really represented in those top 5. And so I'm just wondering, are we pigeonholed a little bit, or whether we can get some movement on it before our next meeting about whether or not we can speak on issues like, you know, Medicaid expansion, or, you know, the legalization of abortion, or drug decriminalization, things like that, that will be happening.
Yeah, I think it's a really important and relevant question. I think the response that or the conversations we've had and the responses that we've received is that, you know, we've been given permission to speak to the things that are on her agenda. And I think, you know, I'm certainly willing to make that ask again to get clarity around that, hopefully within the next week. But I do think it's a really important discussion that we need to have. Mr. Sanchez, and if I'm missing your hand, please, please feel free to also cut in.
I would, may I?
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend and encourage every member of the council to bring your issues that you or organizations you advocate for, or communities or constituencies, that you bring those issues to the legislature and make your voice known to legislators and to the public. But I think when it comes to the council, we serve at the pleasure of the governor. We're not an independent commission. And I think that's why it's kind of important that we keep asking to be made an independent standing commission, so that voice then has more authority. But I think what we make recommendations to the governor, and to the purpose for her acting. And so then as we go forward, maybe even over the years, as long as she's in office, we may serve at her pleasure through these next 6 years possibly, that we bring these to her. And when she accepts these, and then in a cooperation as a council to her as advisors, we want to bring those issues forward. But I think we have to be careful representing the council on issues that the council hasn't vetted and come to a consensus on, to send to the governor, because we've all been invited because of our expertise and our experiences, and those you don't want to lose, and you want to take that, but it has to be in your voice. I would caution us to be careful how we represent the council. You could say you've brought the council, but to say if the council has actually found a consensus on something, when we find a consensus on something, that's I think the work that's in front of us. But that means we still have a lot of work, because there's so many pieces of important legislation or executive orders that we would like to have, which brings back to, I think, yeah, we're concentrated on this session, but as soon as it's over, I'd be in favor of having 2 meetings a month so that we can get to a lot of those other issues. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, in addition to that, the other pieces, even those items that we have as a council agreed on and reached consensus on, that did make it into our larger list of recommendations, because they are not necessarily the things that are they are not on the governor's agenda right now. We don't have the avenue as the advisory council to the governor to speak on those things on behalf of the council outside of our individual advocacy capacity.
Okay, I wanted to go to the next question in the Q&As from Hussein, who says, are there letters or email templates for issues that we can use? And I think we can create our own for those that have been supported, have been listed as supported for the governor. And that might be something we want to look at as an option. But then also remember that we're not the only ones recommending them, right? There are many community organizations and advocates who may have things that we just want to send out, as in support of the work they're doing as well.
Let's see. Any other discussion about how the council can be involved this legislative session? So again, I think if folks have specific priority areas that they want to focus on, or priority legislation that they would like to be a part of, we'll just need to identify that so we know who's going to be working on those pieces on behalf, not on behalf of the council, but representing that this was a recommendation from the council. I think we've laid out pretty clearly that there's a way for us to be involved, and the staff will be communicating. I think there was a question of frequency of communication.
There's also a question in the Q&A asking how can we make a plan to get our community partners involved? If folks have ideas on that.
Yeah. If folks have ideas on that. Rabbi Linick.
Part of what I think is swirling around here in this conversation, and we've touched on it a little bit before, is that, when we started this process, the agenda was very much defined as making recommendations for legislative action or executive order in a variety of areas where racial justice is, being played out. But I think that what's also, we haven't really talked about, I think, and we should, is does the council, after the legislative session, do we have a role in messaging in our community? Do we have a role in addressing issues in general in society around issues of racial justice in our state? In other words, is our purview only limited to making recommendations to the governor in that bandwidth that we've worked with so far, or are there other bandwidth in which we can express ourselves as a consensus body on matters that are happening around us, to offer guidance and even expressions of values that we bring to these conversations? And if that question seems way out of left field, I don't mean it that way, but I wonder, I think part of what we're hearing people say is we want to impact the community as well as the legislative process. And how can we go about that if that's possible or allowed?
Yeah, I think that you are spot on. I don't think it's from left field whatsoever, Rabbi Linick. And I think that that is one of the top questions, and, part of what I was moving towards by asking kind of like, what's the charge of the council going to be going forward? We were very focused on this upcoming legislative session that is now here for the first few months of our work. And I think that, as a full council, including all of the subcommittees, we have over 50 recommendations, right? And there's a lot of work that could be done on those. And then there are still things that were not even reflected in that body of work, right? Because of what our focus has been. And so I think that that is going to be a priority discussion of what is the target of this council moving forward? What is the charge of this council moving forward? And how will that look? And I see and honor Jacqueline's comment in the chat box, and I think that's in that vein as well, around really how do we move this work forward. And so, to Carolyn's suggestion, whether that's a full council meeting or if that becomes a subgroup that wants to focus on defining what that looks like and exploring what that looks like, I think we can decide on that, on what we would want that process to look like. And that's the process of defining what the council is going to do, not the process of the actual council. I see Dr. Sanchez's comment, can we restate what the priorities were that were recommendations from the council that Carolyn shared? Amy, are you able to? I came in, so I don't know if I missed anything. I came in late.
Sure. So as we heard from her when she received our recommendations, that she's in full support of HJR 1, which is the constitutional amendment to the land grant to increase it 1% for early childhood education. She also is going to support the bill that has been previously submitted by Linda Lopez, which is the anti-institutional racism bill. And so I don't know that I have a number on that one yet, but that's one that we also recommended. She said she would like to support family and sick leave, and we are waiting to see which bills. There's multiple bills coming out on that. And so that's one that she's also going to support. But we need to figure out which bill, right? Because multiple bills are coming forward. So we don't know which bill yet, but definitely the idea of family and sick leave. Also, the support of the prosecutorial process for law enforcement deadly use of force. That is one that has moved to the AG's office, and so she is in support of that, but we need to see what comes out of that bill when it leaves the AG's office to make sure that it has the legal remedies on it. The other one is that she has put into her budget a position for the racial equity that would be the staff person for this council. And they believe that the first place to house that is within the governor's office, and that then from there it can move into an independent commission or however that comes out in the future. But so that needs to get passed in the budget. So those are the recommendations that we had for her that she is supporting.
Thank you for restating those. So I think our next steps on this is to identify, if we know what those, what the recommendations and what her agenda, how they align. There have been, like I mentioned, there has been one group that has submitted an op-ed in regards to the land grant permanent fund. And so I think we can move forward in identifying if there are other issues out of that agenda that we want to provide advocacy on, that people, and I say advocacy in the term of being mindful that we're not entering into a lobbying role, but acknowledging that those were recommendations from the council, that we can identify what those are that people want to be involved in and move forward in that way throughout the session. I think that the plan was not for us to meet during session just because things will be completely virtual and probably going late evenings at times. And so we would have communication during session, but not necessarily plan a next meeting just yet. And I just want to honor, I'm seeing the chat box, and I think the conversation in determining how we want to have the conversation as a council, or whether as a special group to discuss thinking about the council's work moving forward, is just reiterated in different forms in the chat box. So I appreciate that. The other thing, and Austin touched on this, is we have room on the agenda for council members to share, again, legislation or other activities that you are individually or organizationally supporting, just so we as council members can choose to either be engaged and support individually in those issues as well. So if there are folks who have bills that your organization or individually you're advocating for, that have a racial justice lens that you would like for council members to be aware of entering into session, we wanted to give space for that as well.
Madam Chair, I can go if I can jump in. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Where do I start? Okay, so organizationally, New Mexico Cafe is supporting and organizing around the paid sick leave legislation, which we'll be happy to report back on as well. To include, really, it's like a working families agenda that we're really pushing forth at the legislature. So paid sick leave, the working families tax credit, which I think we did discuss on this council, And then changes to LICTR, the low income comprehensive tax rebate. I don't remember if we discussed that, but I know for sure we discussed paid sick and the working families tax credit. So we'll be keeping an eye on that pretty closely. I'd be happy to report back on that. And then as on the city council, I've also presented a resolution in support of the early childhood education effort that we'll be voting on next week. But we will be supporting definitely the legalizing cannabis legislation. And so there was a couple other ones, but I think those were the more critical ones that related to also this council that I'd be happy to report on when if we have those meetings throughout the session.
Thank you, Councilor Bencomo. Rabbi Lennick is.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Oh, did I raise my hand by accident? Oops.
I see your hand. Sorry, that's why.
Well, I'd like to mention everybody that we have the New Mexico Coalition Against Hate that is working to sponsor a bill. We're waiting for the number, but it's to improve the hate crime law here in New Mexico. And if anyone's interested in learning more about that, I'm happy to share it outside the meeting. But we're really trying to get current hate crime law, which certainly is an element related to racial justice, to go beyond a simple enhancement to other crimes, which is how the law is currently written. And we also are trying to expand areas of restorative justice as part of the sentencing guidelines, and that those be changed not as options for judicial discretion, but that the law will say judges shall, not just may, add other elements of restorative justice in dealing with hate crimes when they occur in our state. So if anyone's interested in that, I'm happy to share that at some point.
Thank you, Rabbi Lennick. And any questions for Councilor Bencomo or Rabbi Lennick? Okay. Austin, were you coming off mute?
Yeah, sorry, I seem to find the button to put my hand up. So
Totally good.
So yes, from us organizationally, NEBA Education Project, we will be supporting a lot of civic engagement changes, very Native specific for our part, which really aims to solidify a lot of the changes that were made in Senate Bill 4 in the special session that gave some new provisions to allow and make sure that Native people have their own polling locations. We're also working on some of the just transition work, which we're happy to talk about with anybody, but that's not necessarily my portion. And then really the last big focus of ours is going to be predatory lending and bringing small loans down to 36% APR, which still super high, but we were really happy that the governor supported that in her statement today as well as bringing that small lending floor up. What we were saying is, small lenders giving out like $5,001 loans and then charging above the APR cap, which is outrageous. So raising floor is really going to help out, especially during a pandemic year. So happy to talk with anybody about any of those changes and take feedback on any of those as well.
Thank you so much. Dr. Patel, I see your comment. Would you like to lift up some of the overlap that you identified in the press release and our recommendations?
Yeah, and Hussein, who's the chair of this health subcommittee, and I have been chatting, and he mentioned in the email that Amy forwarded to the council on the press release from the governor that the governor mentioned as priorities although we didn't specifically recommend the healthcare affordability fund, but there is a mechanism to improve access to care in her priorities, which I think is in line with the health subcommittee's recommendations. And she also, in her priorities, mentions, you know, the decriminalization of abortion supporting legalization of cannabis. And so those are listed as public priorities, and I think there are obvious overlaps in what our recommendations were. So I'm wondering whether we can expand upon what Carolyn mentioned at the top of our meeting in terms of what we can publicly advocate for as council members, given that she's already the governor has publicly announced these as priorities.
I think that's a really important topic of discussion. I think that I know for certain, like the decriminalization of abortion was on our recommendation list in that, you know, stated form. And so I think, are there other points of discussion that folks have around that, or other thoughts that folks have around that? I want to make sure that we had, you know, again, there are things that we have we reached consensus on in our recommendations for that. And so are there any discussion points for that? Do folks have thoughts about that or questions about that process? Amy, do you have thoughts about that?
I'm reading through the press release again. I missed that the abortion one was on here. I'm seeing it now. I mean, I don't want to say yes because, right, like I don't have the authority to say yes. But I want to say, I bet, right? And so I'll check in with Carolyn because I imagine, you know, these initiatives are ones that the governor is strongly in favor of. Anything that got sent out on the press release today is something that she's very, very committed to. And so I'm guessing that there would be no problem with us advocating for these as well. But I will definitely check on that and get back with you all to make sure that that is a for sure yes. But I feel confident in saying, yeah, I'm pretty sure that it'd be okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I really appreciate you raising that, Dr. Patel, and to Hussein for also raising that as y'all are discussing it. My hesitation or my reservation was just, I think it's extremely important, and it may just, it is a reflection that perhaps those weren't being viewed from that racial justice lens, which we need to make sure is also applied in consideration of that. So thank you for raising that. And thanks, Amy, for asking and getting back to us on that.
Yeah.
Any other council members that would like to share legislative activities or priorities that are important that you feel are important for council members? Dr. Tanasia, I see your hand. I think that they have that. Any other activities from council members that you would like people to know about? Okay, Dr. Tanisha, unable to unmute. If you would like to type it in, please do.
If I can add one, that CYFD is advocating for a state Indian Child Welfare Act. Many of you may know that there is a federal Indian Child Welfare Act that for many, many years was never challenged. 2013, and it's recently been challenged and now CYFD and many Native American advocates have worked together to create a state Indian Child Welfare Act. And so that is one we might also want to individually look at as something important to this council.
Thank you. Any others?
Sorry, also Anjali is wanting to ask a question. She's in our audience. If you don't mind, I'll unmute her so that she can ask her question, if that's okay.
Please do, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Anjali, you can speak now.
Great, thank you. So I'm here as a member of the Health Subcommittee. As we're talking about other legislation and efforts, I wanted to share, there's a campaign called New Mexico Together for Healthcare, brought together by the New Mexico Center on Law and Poverty, Strong Families, Health Action, Partnership for Community Action, and then a number of others. And Casa de Salud, which is the organization that I work for, is organizing healthcare workers on these 4 bills that I wanted to just share that are related to, in some great ways, to what we recommended as the Health Committee. One is the legislation that was creating a healthcare affordability fund. So I think, Dr. Patel, you mentioned that wasn't necessarily in the recs, but that was in the recs that we had made, and maybe I just misunderstood you. So there's actual legislation being filed by Representative Armstrong to take the federal tax that was put on insurers and move that to the state and move that money to the creation of a healthcare affordability fund. And that's a governor's bill right now. And we are, Representative Armstrong is pushing so that there is expanded coverage so that folks who otherwise would not be able to access health insurance could qualify for that. There's also a bill prohibiting discrimination against immigrants by state or locally funded healthcare programs to get around a federal PROWARA, it's a very hard acronym to say, to allow for county indigent care programs and hospitals to also allow financial discounts and support for people who are immigrants. There's a third piece of legislation protecting patients from medical debt and ensuring that hospitals don't send to collections people making under a certain amount of the federal poverty level, other protections that's being put forward by Katie Duhigg, and then legislation expanding New Mexico's emergency Medicaid program to cover the full costs of COVID-19 treatment instead of sometimes what's just considered emergency. So I'd be happy to share the fact sheets for those with members of the council if there's a way to do that. And we're very happy about these, and especially one of them is definitely aligned with it has become a governor's bill, which is great.
Thank you for lifting those up. And I think all of these, you all pointing out the healthcare affordability, I think those are all things we should go back and ensure that they align and add to our list of things, because I think that only strengthens, right, what we've put forward in our recommendations to identify what did actually kind of materialize. Any others? So Amy, can you tell us if you have a plan or ideas around how to kind of communicate out as you all are tracking things, how you'll communicate out with the council about things moving forward?
So I think the idea around having groups that might want to support any of these individually, we can create groups if folks are into that. If not, what Shawnee and Kaylee and Tammy and I will do is we'll have a meeting probably the end of this week or early next week, sometime before the session starts, and just kind of decide amongst ourselves how we'll be able to track it, who'll be in charge of what, I think our question for you all is how often do you want to be communicated with, right? Bills move really, really fast. The beginning of the session starts to move really, really slow, and it seems like nothing's happening. And then all of a sudden it picks up, and it's hard to keep track of. So we could do daily emails, we could do weekly emails. It really is, I'm going to put it to you all, how much communication would you like?
Thank you. How much communication would we like?
While people are thinking about that, I'm gonna ask Christopher Ramirez, who is on our Public Safety and Law Enforcement committee. I'm gonna unmute him so that he can talk about the things that his group is doing. Christopher, if you don't mind.
Yes, thank you, Amy. Thank you to the council. I in chat, I said that we're part of the board here in Albuquerque, but also statewide to celebrate Transit Equity Day on February 4th, which is Rosa Parks' birthday. This is the 4th year that the Labor Solidarity Network has used the Rosa Parks' birthday as an opportunity to connect to transit equity. And there's important transit equity work across the state. So we're confirming with Representative Rubio how to engage the House Transportation and
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, it's very hard to hear.
Yeah. It's muffled. Christopher, we can't hear you.
Is that a little bit better? I'm sorry.
That's so much better. Yes.
I apologize.
Thank
It was
you.
my phone. So I'll just quickly do it again. Thank you for your time. I just want to reach out and say if anybody would like to join us, February 4th is Transit Equity Day. It's also Rosa Parks' birthday. We're working with the Labor Solidarity Network, who has been doing this for 4 years. And we're looking forward to doing work in Albuquerque and statewide in New Mexico around the transit equity issues in lots of different, both urban and rural communities in the state, connected to so many racial justice issues. And so we're confirming with Representative Rubio on how to connect to the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee on both February 4th, but then looking at opportunities to not a specific bill this year, but looking at conversations around equity framing and anti-racism around transportation and infrastructure statewide. So please connect with me if you have any questions about that. Thanks again, Amy.
Thank you. Any other council members have legislative priorities they're sharing? Mr. Sanchez and Don, I see that question about whether we can get contact information. Do you mean around the council members in general, the full council list? Or for Christopher? For Christopher, okay. So Christopher, there was a question. You want Christopher's contact information. Got it. Mr. Sanchez.
And I can share that. I'll connect the two of you.
Thank you.
May I?
Yes, please.
So I'm always impressed about how many wonderful areas we all advocate for. And I remember the original wish list when we were all asked to put the our desire discussed, and we never did work through that whole. We didn't work through that whole list. So, and we still need to work through a lot of it. But I'd like to remind us. I think we have to be very careful as we work through these to get consensus, that to speak in the name of the council, it has to be what we finalize. And we can add if we want to have meetings, and I don't know how much time we have during the session to do that, but I think what we sent to the governor is what I think we can advocate for. Not have the dog have the tail wag the dog. I don't think because the governor supports something that automatically makes the council that the council approved it. You know, if the governor wishes for us to consider something for our recommendation, I think that's the proper method forward. So I think because otherwise we're going to water down our voice and our effort, and I think go against our consensus power that we have. I think we can have sometimes a consensus where one or two people would not agree, and we would agree to disagree, but let the majority of the council move forward with something. But I think it has to go back. What did we develop in that recommendation that was printed, shared with the council after our discussions and vetted? Then, because there's a lot of good legislation that I know I'm gonna want to support that we didn't vet, and is not on the governor's agenda. But the other way around, just because the governor supports something, I don't think that indicates that we all support that. So the vetting process and the discussion process is very important, and then what we recommended to her. And we can always say to the public, yeah, well, this is what we recommended to the governor. She may not have accepted that. That was a recommendation. But I think then it gains even more power when she does accept it, and we go forward with that. So I think our important advocacy issues are all important, and hearing each other sharing is going to bring me to want to help you and get those over the finish line. But I don't think I can say in the name of the council unless this council actually vetted something. So let's be careful with that. That's just my hope, so that I can when I do speak about what the council vetted, I know I have everybody's voice and everybody's constituencies or organizations they represent.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it is an important distinction. And so this specific, and I'll clarify, this specific agenda item, I included on today's agenda because I felt like it would be beneficial to kind of our council community to hear, because I know that we all are involved in advocacy in different ways throughout the state on a diverse range of issues. And so wanted to give an opportunity for council members to be able to share the important work and the important issues that are being advanced during this upcoming session, not as things that the council are recommending or supporting, but that we as individuals serving together on this council can be aware of and choose to support or not. And then there's a second point that has come up in this discussion, which is the question that Amy is going to take back with the identification of what I have highlighted as potentially 3 additional things that the council actually did reach consensus on, did include in our recommendations, and were also on the governor's priority list, so that we may be expanding that initial list that Carolyn presented to include those additional items. And so thank you for that important distinction. And this was really a chance for community building amongst our council to share the important work all of y'all are so committed to in our state.
And I do have text confirmation from Carolyn that yes, we can move forward with those ones that we sent as recommendations, but that she did not report out on. So we are okay to do that.
So to restate that, that's the decriminalization of abortion, the mechanism to improve access to care, and the legislation created for healthcare affordability that Representative Armstrong is sponsoring. Is that correct? Okay, so from there, I think, well, let's see if there are any other council members that have things that they would like to share of the work that they are doing. Anything else?
If I could just jump in really quickly, I just wanted to say, like, of the process going forward, if we could get like a list of everyone who's planning on working together on specific legislation, so like the healthcare affordability, it would be really helpful if we could get that for the purposes of knowing how frequently we should be meeting, because it'll be really often for people who are working together to try to coordinate those things, and it'll be much less frequent for people who are just, say, dropping in from time to time on one piece of legislation. So if there could be even like a sort of a tally of like, here's what I plan on working on, so can I get anybody else who's working on this as part of like the text chain? That would be really, really helpful in defining how frequently like those little subgroups need to be meeting.
Absolutely. That was actually where I was going to go when I paused. So thank you for lifting that up. Is to ask, I think most beneficial in what we discovered with the work groups is that if people have an interest out of those issues that they know that they want to be involved on, that we go ahead and state that tonight. We can also lay that out in an email and ask people to respond. But I know from our experience with the work group, it's more efficient if we just kind of name it here. And then that way we know who is interested in the different priorities so that we can begin to plan and lay out what that communication is going to look like. Because each individual group may choose choose differently also what they're going to do. They may choose an op-ed like one group has done. And so if you have an interest in any of the bills that have been prioritized that you want to be on, we can do that now. Or we'll send out an email, and we'll send out an email after, but you know how email gets. Do you have something, Austin? You have ones?
If everybody is comfortable with like Google Drive, like a spreadsheet, it would be really helpful just to list those priorities. Like just to do, here's this legislation, this legislation, this legislation, here's who's sponsoring it, here's the bill number, and then people can put their name next to it. I'm not sure if everyone's comfortable with Google Drive, but it would be helpful to see in some kind of very simply laid out way like that.
Well, I think that does sound like a great idea, and we have had challenges. I'll have to defer to Amy on that regarding our ability to use something like a Google Drive. But I think what we'll start with is the email list of what those stated bills are, and then asking you if you do want to be involved on those to please respond so that we can build that out and kind of visually see it. Okay, and I see, Janine, you saying you support that as well. So, okay. We'll start with the email, and if you're interested on any of the issues, just sign up for that. Any other priorities, legislation, activities that council members are working on? Understood on the Google Drive recommendation. I think we have limitations to being able to use a Google Drive as the council. I will mention that we are supporting the Black Central Organizing Committee. The New Mexico Black Central Organizing Committee is supporting the Crown Act. Representative William Stapleton and Senator Harold Pope will be sponsoring the Crown Act to prevent race-based hair discrimination. House Bill 29 has been pre-filed. Great. Well, I don't see any additional discussion. I wanted to make sure if anyone else had anything, we had a moment to lift that up. I think our next steps are that we will send out, I will ask Amy to send out the list of bills that the governor has prioritized that are a part of our recommendations, and ask for you to respond with which priorities you want to be involved on, and then we'll begin to set a schedule for how often we'll communicate those and move forward from there. Does that sound good? Is the plan of action?
Can I ask a question? I joined late, so I'm not sure if you've already covered this.
Sure.
I just wanted to know, but like with the COVID restrictions, you know, all of my experience in helping with legislative selection is like being there and helping to lobby and like, you know, doing a lot of in-person explanation and advocacy. What ways can we help? I don't plan on being in Santa Fe, but I do obviously care deeply about a lot of these issues and want to be as helpful as possible. So what is it going to look like, and how can we help given all of the restrictions?
That's a really great question. Amy, do you want to talk a little bit about what session's going to look like?
Session is going to look like this is going to look like. I do believe that I heard that the Senate will be using Zoom rather than WebEx. I think that opens up some possibilities for breakout rooms and things like that that may exist. I haven't heard how they're going to do that. I do know, right, that there will be sending out of, like, you can ask the chairperson to be on issues, but I don't think that I anything formal come up about how it's going to look, other than that it will be mostly virtual, or at least there will be virtual options for attending. I think, right, what I would probably say is that many things many of the legislators have figured out over the interim committees how to do some of these things, right? How to talk to constituents, how to meet with community organizations, how to get input. And so I think that it's not like we're starting from square one next week, right? Because we have had the interim committees all summer long, where folks have learned how to do this in a not perfect way, but you know, at least better than on day one when they didn't know how to do it at all. So I would say there's still the options to engage with your legislator. It's just, you know, trying to figure out what pull them out into the hallway or find them in the hallway means in a virtual environment. And I'm sure that we will receive some training and ideas from other community organizations and from the governor's senior staff, and I will certainly pass those on all as we go through this process. But I think we're all learning this together.
Yeah, thank you. And Janine, I don't know at what point you joined, but earlier in the conversation, we talked about organizing as a council around, now that we know what from our recommendations are also on the governor's agenda, organizing amongst ourselves to coordinate how we want to advocate, not lobby, but advocate to acknowledge that these issues are things that the council recommended. And so that's why we're going to send the email with those stated priorities so that folks can organize by each issue and decide in those groups how we want to move forward in advocating on those issues this session.
Excellent. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Anything else? Any other? Yes, Dawn.
So just to clarify or get a better understanding of next steps, is the council pretty much going to just focus on legislative issues while the legislator is in session, and then regroup maybe after that is over to focus on things that have nothing to do with the policies, legislative policies? Because I still think this goes back, there's a lot of racial justice work that we can do that has nothing to do with the legislation and legislative branch, where we could focus exclusively on the executive branch that's within the control of the governor. And so will we have any subcommittees focusing on that work, or are the groups that are meeting going to focus just on the legislation or legislative while it's in session? So it's kind of what I'm getting at is we're just focusing on that for now, and then we will touch base on other issues after it's over? I guess that's my question. Or can we also have subgroups or subcommittees focus on other racial justice equity work that doesn't have anything to do with the legislative session? And then that falls in line with what we were tasked to do. And so I'm still kind of surprised at how much focus we're putting on policy. Like, it's important, but I think there's a lot of other things that we could do in the now that have nothing to do with the policy. In addition to that, I also want to see if we have a process on how we introduce new issues or new concerns that are happening in the community, where we can introduce it, discuss it, and determine if this is something that the council would like to address or work on. Because I think that a lot of things are happening in our community, and I think we need to focus on that, and that it's also timely. So for example, like the new federal funding that's coming for rent relief. So that is going to be available for states and local municipalities. And so how the funding gets distributed, like, that's a conversation I think we probably should discuss. The petroglyph tasing incident that happened, and then kind of just discussing like Indigenous religious freedoms or access to sacred sites and public properties or public lands. These are things that have happened recently. So I kind of want to have a better understanding of what's a good way to introduce this, discuss this, and to keep momentum going, and for everyone to have an opportunity to bring these conversations in and provide recommendations to the governor, saying like, we need to talk with this department, or we need to talk with these jurisdictions, or we need to bring in these community members to really bring light to these issues that are very racial, have racial impacts. So I don't know if this is part of this conversation that we should have now, or if we can schedule another meeting and discuss it, but these are kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dawn. I think that they're very timely, and it's really important to raise that. One of the questions we have around really like how to focus moving forward, I think that that's central to how we move forward. And I'm open for discussion about what that can look like. I think that there's a question of, there's the urgency and timeliness of all of those things that you raised. And then I'm also trying to be mindful of the capacity of those who are staffing our council and the subcommittees, especially, just during legislative session, recognizing that it's a resource intense time. And so really open to us having that discussion now to try to figure out how we can hold both and give both the consideration they deserve, or give that the consideration it deserves, for sure.
Yeah, early in the meeting, what we had said is that there probably should be a committee or a subcommittee to talk about how the council does move forward. And so I think that that is a great way to bring these things up, Dawn, of what we can move forward on immediately and what we can put into as a future way of moving forward on things. And so again, if folks are interested in that, please let me know either through the chat or send me an email, and we will form a subcommittee of the subcommittees, or however we want to call it, to really talk about exactly what you're saying. So Austin, I see you. I definitely will put you on the email. If other folks want to send me emails or in the chat, I will. I'll form a group for us to get together and basically talk about all of that stuff of how do we move forward. Again, one of the initiatives that we want to support is that the governor has put into her budget a permanent staffing position of this. And I think as someone who has taken new positions very, very often, it would be very wonderful for that person to come in with a list of, here's the things that we would like for you to work on, and how we would like you to organize the council. So definitely want to continue that conversation.
Yeah, and I think thank you for that, Amy. I think it would be good while we're asking people, while we're sending out the information around the legislative priorities that folks will be responding to include this work group in that list too, so people can respond to that. And that way, that can be some of, we could start organizing the meeting of that group while legislative session is going on. And things may come out of that we need to have a full council meeting sooner to discuss and decide on things. Does that sound amenable? I didn't see any head. Okay, I'm seeing. Okay, I'm seeing already. Yes, Don. Did you want to say something else?
Yeah, my little chat thingy froze, but I'll say yes. But then also, I'm open to weekly legislative updates.
Okay.
Yeah, I think to be emailed.
There's a question about if these meetings are able to be moved to Zoom. I think. Well, I'll send that to you. I'll let you answer that, Amy.
So that the governor's office is in a contract with WebEx. It is the only one that has provided the security that we're required to have in running through the governor's office. And so we are obligated to use WebEx. So it is what we have available to us.
Thank you. And so for clarification, like when we're doing the work group meetings, are we allowed to use Zoom then? When it's not the official full council meeting?
So I have a paid Zoom account through my position, and so I've been using that through our subcommittee meetings, but that it does not have a webinar feature. And so it's paid for, but it's not paid for at the webinar features portion. So we wouldn't be able to do these, but we can certainly do the subcommittees or meeting types with Zoom.
Yeah.
But again, it has to be a paid account. We cannot use the free accounts. It does not have the security measures that we're required to have.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And then I think the final thing I have pending from what's been discussed today is the frequency of updates from Amy, Shani, Tammy, and Kaylee. Acknowledging that the groups that are formed around specific issues will probably be in more communication, will be in communication more frequently than the full council will be receiving updates. I see weekly with midweek check-ins, calls to actions as needed. Does that seem agreeable? Weekly updates and then more frequent for those who are volunteering to be focused on specific issues. Great. I see a few head nods. Okay. All righty. Well, I think we've come to the end of our agenda. Are there any final questions or comments that anyone has? No. All right. Yes, Mr. Sanchez.
Yeah, I just want to, like in these hard times, I mean, we're seeing so much division, and I think the council's done some wonderful work. And I think we just released a poll, a very important poll that discovered that the poll discovered that New Mexicans agree on taking care of our kids, and this is, our children, minority, majority state, when you see the children in our state. And this was by Gabe Sanchez, and it showed 79% support for the constitutional amendment. And in this time that we're seeing so much division, I think we hit right on where there is common ground and where New Mexicans do agree, Republican or Democrat. That's something we should celebrate when we can find some kind of agreement. And so, with that hope, we send each other off to see what happens over the next week and then over this session. But that common ground exists, and we're working for that. And everybody in this group should be congratulated for that. So have a safe, next few weeks.
Yeah, thank you. Those are good. Those are good parting words to end on a hopeful tone. And just wishing you all much self and communal care. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your neighbor. We need each other during these times. So please move with grace and ease and be safe. Take good care, y'all. We'll be in touch soon. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.